Hello and welcome to Thought-Provoking Tech. I'm Zach, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about Paperspace for Teams. So Paperspace for Teams essentially adds a couple levels of added functionality to what is already existing in the Paperspace cloud desktops. On the very basic level, it is essentially a private network of cloud computers. What this essentially allows you to do is network your computers and have them interact in a way that they wouldn't be able to do if you weren't on a private network. It is not too dissimilar from what you'd be able to do on a home network or in a business setting. In fact, if you're a business user, you can actually set up an Active Directory utilizing this private network for the added features that you do get with Active Directory. So this could be very similar to what you have on premise, especially if you're a small or medium-sized business, or even like a home setup with your cloud desktops. I haven't tested the gaming side of this yet for more home-centered users, which I see a lot of people potentially using. But definitely for people that are kind of setting up a small business, this is a very powerful feature. So I'll be kind of running through some of these steps. If you're an IT manager, this will be pretty native for you. But what this video hopefully is going to do is going to help people that are relatively tech savvy set up this cloud desktops. So you could do the same thing on Amazon's AWS or Microsoft's Azure or the other different cloud hosting providers out there. But what Paperspace has done is made this super simple and kind of done some of the back-end stuff behind the scenes, and you don't even see that, and make it very simple to the end user to set up. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. Alright, so I've loaded up the Paperspace console, and you can likely already see that a couple pieces of functionality have been added simply because of the new menu items along the top navigation. I'm going to go ahead and jump to networks because the networking is kind of what makes the Paperspace for Teams really possible. On the left navigation, you can see that there's 4 pieces of networking data that you have control over. The very first of which is your network. That is the private network that you will set up upon migrating your account to a Paperspace for Teams account. The main thing here that you want to focus on is the region that you're creating this network in. If you want to have interactivity between your computers and shared drives, they must all be both in the same private network, but also in the same region, because to be in the same private network, you have to be in the same region to begin with. So you just keep that in mind as you're setting things up, and if you already have existing computers set up in a certain region, to make sure that you create your network in that same region. Moving on, you can actually set up a VPN. I haven't tackled this yet, so I'm probably going to do a dedicated video on it, because it might result in digging a little bit deeper into the Paperspace architecture. It's something I don't want to cover in this video, which is just kind of a quick getting started with Paperspace for Teams. Moving on, you have the ability to create an Active Directory. If you're in a small or medium-sized business, or even a large business, but I'm kind of focusing on smaller and medium-sized businesses because that's kind of where the Paperspace for Teams will really shine. You can actually set up an Active Directory account, and that's pretty much if you're in a small or medium-sized business, whether you know it or not, you're probably on an Active Directory network. So if you know what that is, then essentially you can set up the same thing here, and essentially it gives you a little bit of added functionality in giving users access to certain pieces of software. For instance, sometimes they authenticate through an Active Directory connection. There's a lot of different features with Active Directory, and you can actually set up that controller straight with Paperspace. And finally, the last piece of networking data that you kind of have control over is public IPs. So you can create a public IP for your network, and with that functionality, you can share and access maybe a server that you've set up that runs a certain piece of software for your business. And so you'll be able to access that while not actually in the private network in your Paperspace, but maybe while you're on premise and access that server from within your business itself, and not necessarily have to be on a cloud desktop. So that is one way you can just use Paperspace more for kind of setting up some servers that are pretty cost effective compared to other cloud providers out there, and kind of have users still kind of authenticate through more than likely a VPN and a public IP. Moving on, users is kind of the next major cog in the kind of gear that will makes Paperspace for Teams possible. You have to have a private network, and then the next thing you have to really take advantage of. You don't technically have to take advantage of it because I'm not taking advantage of it. I've had this more set up for me personally. And one functionality that I plan on using is shared drives personally, and really not taking advantage of users at this point in time for my personal account. But creating a new user is insanely simple. All you need is the first and last name, an email, and a password. It is literally that simple to create a new user. Once that user has been created, they will have some actually have some extra features and options, whether they want to set up two-factor authentication and so on and so forward for their account. But just setting up that initial account is very simple and allows you to create a bunch of different accounts very quickly in rapid succession if you want to migrate a team to Paperspace for Teams. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Machines tab because this is where the meat and the glory of Paperspace for Teams is. So the very first tab you see is the machines. You'll likely be used to this if you're already using Paperspace as an individual user. You can see that I have several computers set up that are all off right now. These are named the Standard, GPU Plus, and the Pro. Those are named after the performance package that they are assigned to. And essentially I use these more for testing the performance with different pieces of software and doing benchmarks. And I already have all these computers set up so I can very quickly log in, do some benchmarks, and then be on my way. I also have set up a Air device that's very cheaply to run on a month. And I actually plan on using this in a future video to synchronize my Synology NAS device at my home with my Paperspace private network. So I have this computer kind of synchronizing with and have shared drives attached to it that it synchronizes to, and then have those shared drives on different computers that I can very easily access and have all my data in two locations. So kind of going to a quick jump to the Pro computer real quick. There are two things I want to point out here. The very first of which is the ability to reassign. So this gives you, the administrator for the account, the ability to reassign your machine to a given user. I haven't created any users right now, so I don't have the ability to reassign it. But if you did have the computer set up, you had all the software set up for that user, you could then reassign it to them, and they'll be able to go on their merry way very quickly and very easily, and just start utilizing the machine without you having to log into their account and wait for you to set up their software. Once you have given them credentials, you can reassign a computer to them, and by the time they have logged in, there'll be a machine there waiting on them, and you can even have turned it on for them if you wanted to. Kind of like the lights are on, the house is ready, guys. So very simple to set up. Right now, it is kind of clunky if the user's having issues. If you want to kind of help them out, you can set up remote desktop access software just like you could in any network. Another thing is you could reassign it back from that user back to you. That is a somewhat time consuming, as the Paperspace architecture has to reassign it from a certain user to another user. It has to shut down, restart, you fix the issue, it shuts down, then restarts back for that user. So it is a pretty time consuming loop to do that. One feature that they're planning on adding is the ability to allow administrators to launch any computer, whether it's been assigned to them or not, and that'll be an awesome feature if it becomes available, and hopefully it becomes available pretty soon. Next thing I want to talk about in the machine tab is templates. You always have had access to snapshots, but templates is a new feature for people that use Paperspace for Teams. So say that you have a certain set of software for a certain group of people. Say possibly your sales team uses a certain set of common software between them. You can actually set that up on a single computer, then create a template from it that you can actually easily use to deploy and provision multiple different computers for multiple different users from that core template, and just have them log into the computer, utilize their username and a password to sign into the software. That's how a lot of different softwares work nowadays. Is you don't have to have a certain serial key. You essentially just authenticate by signing in with your username and password, and that's how they kind of check, because they're kind of always connected to the internet with common software nowadays. So templates is very awesome, especially if you have a large team, or even just a medium-sized team or small team with a bunch of people with the exact same software that they'll be using. In the early days, I definitely see Paperspace being used for more high-end stuff, engineering, being able to access that while on a smaller end device. But as we kind of move to a continued move to the mobile first kind of setup, definitely see this still being useful for people like on an iPad Pro or a Surface device, having more access while on the road or not at their main location, or even just using it on a constant basis, simply because you can log in, have the power of the cloud, and not have to have a super powerful local machine wherever you are. All right, so with the shared drives, a big thing I want to talk about is kind of setting up a very similar task with Amazon's AWS. So if you're going to do something similar, you would likely use EBS, because it's kind of the direct comparison to what the shared drives will be able to do on Paperspace. So for 4.5 cents per gigabyte, you'll be able to set up an EBS drive. You do have a lot more control over exactly how large that size of that drive is with Amazon EBS, but I think that the price savings of Paperspace will pay for that loss of functionality and the loss of fine-tuning the exact size of the drives. So to create a drive, you just click the shared drive button, give the drive a name, and choose the size. So if you were going to create a drive that's 250 gigabytes on Paperspace for Teams, it would only cost $5. For the exact same size on AWS, that'd be $11.25. So you can see the price disparity is already there. The prices, which is continue to double for each of these tiers because they're just essentially double the price. So that would be for 500 gigabytes, that would be $22.50. And for a terabyte, that would be $45. And for 2 terabytes, that would be $90 on AWS. So you can see that especially as the size of your drive grows, the savings really start to stack up by choosing Paperspace for your cloud desktop provider. Not only is it kind of cheaper for your hourly rate or your monthly rate by setting up a computer, you save a lot of money on the storage, and this would be something very major, especially for businesses kind of dipping their toes into cloud desktops and don't want to invest a ton of money in right off the bat. This will give you a fairly cheap option to start utilizing cloud data centers. So that is a huge thing about Paperspace that I really love, and it's going to be a huge benefit. And the fact that it is so simple to set up these shared drives is what really makes Paperspace tick for me personally. Each shared drive will have a unique username and password, which will allow you to have very fine control over who has access to what drives. You can essentially set up these up as a network drive, a mapped drive, and give users access to only that drive, and map the drives that you want that user to have access to, which gives you very, very fine control over who has access to what. So very powerful, very easy to set up, and it's kind of the common trend with Paperspace for Teams. It's going to be very easy to set up, and it has a lot of power and a lot of functionality, which is why I really see Paperspace really having a huge possibility in the future to really start expanding as their name starts to get out there more and people start to discover what you can actually do with Paperspace cloud desktops. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope it gave you a little bit of information and kind of how Paperspace for Teams work. I will be kind of digging a little bit deeper into Paperspace for Teams in future videos. For example, possibly exploring the VPNs. No promises on that, but it's something I do want to explore. It just depends on how much time I have, how quickly that happens, and also kind of the entire setting up a cloud NAS to synchronize with my Synology NAS device at my house. So there'll be a lot of different things that I plan on doing videos with Paperspace in general, but also Paperspace for Teams. So stay tuned for that content. If you did like this video, please like it and subscribe to stay tuned for more great content from Thought-Provoking Tech. If you do like the videos that I'm making, think about hitting that little bell icon on YouTube right next to the subscribe button. That'll let you be notified as I release new videos so you don't ever miss anything from me. Also, if you do like the content that I produce, consider heading over to patreon.com and becoming my Patreon. I would greatly appreciate that, and your support means a lot to me. Once again, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and until next time, Zach out.